These are 5 Mercedes-Benz cars from the 1970s that were so wildly ambitious, so absurdly over-engineered that they make most modern supercars look like nothing special. A sedan faster than every other production car on the road. A prototype that hit 250 miles per hour and was never sold to the public. A racing sedan so ridiculously oversized it earned the nickname the Red Pig. A limousine beloved equally by rock stars and brutal dictators. And a military truck that accidentally became the most iconic luxury SUV of all time. The 1970s were supposed to be a decade of restraint. The oil crisis was hammering the auto industry. Emissions regulations were choking horsepower. Governments were telling car makers to slow down, downsize, and play it safe. And Mercedes-Benz responded by building some of the most insane vehicles in automotive history. Let's start with a car that looked like a perfectly respectable luxury sedan, but was hiding a dirty, magnificent secret under its hood. The Mercedes-Benz 450 SCL 6.9, built from 1975 to 1980. On the outside, it was virtually indistinguishable from a standard W116 S-Class. Same conservative lines, same stately proportions, same car your neighbor's orthodontist might drive. But under that unassuming hood sat a 6.8-liter M100 V8, the same power plant from the legendary Mercedes 600 flagship limousine, now tuned to produce 286 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. And here's where Mercedes got wonderfully petty. The engine was actually 6.8 liters, but Mercedes badged it as the 6.9 specifically to make sure everyone knew it had a bigger engine than Rolls-Royce. And that's not speculation. That was the actual reasoning. They wanted the number on the trunk to be a quiet flex aimed directly at Crewe, England. And you've got to love Mercedes for showing up with that kind of energy. This thing hit 62 miles per hour in 7.4 seconds and topped out at 149 miles per hour in 1975 in a car that weighed nearly 4,400 pounds. It was the fastest, most powerful production sedan in the world, and it held that title for 5 straight years until production ended in 1980. But the engine wasn't the only thing that made the 6.9 special. It was the engineering underneath. This was the first Mercedes ever equipped with a full hydropneumatic, self-leveling suspension system technology, licensed from Citroën of all companies. The French and the Germans collaborating on suspension. That sentence alone is worth the price of admission. Every single M100 engine was hand-built and then bench-tested for 265 minutes, nearly 4.5 hours of testing per engine, with 40 of those minutes running at full load. Each one, every time, and with no exceptions. Now, if you were buying this car in North America, you got a slightly different animal. American emissions regulations forced Mercedes to drop the compression ratio from 8.8 to 1 down to 8.0 to 1, bringing the horsepower down to 250 and torque to 360 pound-feet. Still absurdly fast for the era, but a noticeable step down from the European version. And here's an interesting footnote. The reason Mercedes could even sell the 6.9 in the United States was because of the 300 SD turbo diesel. That car, the first turbo diesel passenger car ever made, was developed specifically for North America to help Mercedes meet CAFE fuel economy regulations. It averaged out the fleet numbers enough to let them keep selling the fire-breathing V8 on American soil. The turbo diesel existed so the monster could live. Only 7,380 were ever built. Out of nearly 500,000 W116 S-classes produced during a 7-year run, fewer than 8,000 got the big engine. The car was even delayed in its introduction because Mercedes was genuinely worried the oil crisis would kill it before it ever reached a showroom. They waited for the right moment, and when they finally pulled the trigger, they created something that still keeps up with modern traffic today, 50 years later. Now, if the 6.9 was a wolf in sheep's clothing, the next car on this list didn't even pretend to be a sheep. The Mercedes-Benz C111. A series of experimental prototypes built between 1969 and 1979, collectively representing some of the most forward-thinking automotive engineering of the 20th century. Only 14, possibly 16, were ever built. None were sold, not because they couldn't find buyers, but because Mercedes flat out refused. The C111 started life as a test bed for Wankel rotary engines. In its basic form, it featured a rear mid-engine layout, rear wheel drive, gull-wing doors, seating for two, and a fiberglass body bonded to a steel frame. Low, wide, and relatively compact at just 175 inches long, the design was pure function, but it looked like nothing else on the road. It looked like the future. The first iteration debuted at the 1969 Frankfurt Motor Show. By the time the C111 Mark II showed up at the 1970 Geneva Motor Show with a four-rotor Wankel engine producing 349 horsepower, the automotive world lost its collective mind. Mercedes claimed a top speed of 186 miles per hour and a 0 to 62 time of 4.8 seconds. And remember, that's in 1970. To put that in perspective, the fastest Ferrari of the era, the 365 GT B4 Daytona, topped out at around 174 miles per hour. And here's the part that still makes car enthusiasts wince. Customers begged Mercedes to put the C111 into production. They showed up at the factory with blank checks, literally blank checks. Write whatever number you want. Just sell me the car. And Mercedes said no, every single time. The C111 was never intended to be a production vehicle. It was a rolling laboratory, nothing more. Mercedes kept it at the back of the barn and left everyone staring through the window at what a mid-1970s German supercar could have been. The car was originally called the C101 until Peugeot's lawyers got involved, the same way they had with Porsche when the 901 became the 911. Peugeot apparently owned the naming rights to any three-digit number with a 0 in the middle, so the C101 became the C111, and an automotive anecdote was born. But Mercedes wasn't done with the C111, not even close. They pivoted from Wankel engines to diesel and turbocharging, then took the platform to the Nardo test track in Italy to chase world speed records. The C111 Mark II-D broke 16 records in 1976, not 16 diesel records, 16 records regardless of engine type. The C111 Mark III then broke 9 world speed records and 11 international class records during a single 12-hour run, averaging approximately 199 miles per hour for 12 straight hours. And then came the final form, the C111 Mark IV. Mercedes dropped in a turbocharged 4.8-liter V8, making 500 horsepower. And in 1979, Dr. Hans Leibold took it around Nardo's 12.5-kilometer ring at an average lap speed of 403.7 kilometers per hour. That's 250.8 miles per hour. Again, this is in 1979. One more detail. During the C111 Mark III's Nardo record attempt, someone spotted a hedgehog wandering onto the track and radioed the driver in time to avoid it. Thankfully, the hedgehog was rescued, and the world's fastest diesel car was momentarily stopped by a small spiny mammal. Turned out even the C111 had its limits. The C111 was so far ahead of its time that it still looks relevant today. Mercedes acknowledged as much in 2023 when they unveiled the Vision 111 concept, a direct homage to the car that was too revolutionary to sell. Speaking of cars that had no business being on a racetrack, let's talk about the Red Pig. July 24th, 1971, Spa-Francorchamps, Belgium. Almost 80 touring cars line up for the start of the 24-hour race. The grid is packed with lightweight European coupes, Ford Capris, Alfa Romeo, BMW CS models, and purpose-built racing machines that are nimble and aerodynamic. And right in the middle of this field sits a massive crimson-painted Mercedes-Benz 300 SEL, a luxury sedan, a car designed to chauffeur executives to board meetings, painted bright red, and entered by a small, independent engineering firm called AMG. AMG had been founded just 4 years earlier, in 1967, by Hans Werner Aufrecht and Erhard Melcher. The letter A stood for Aufrecht, the letter M for Melcher, and the letter G for Grotesquely, their hometown. They took the 300 SEL's M100 engine and bored it out to 6.8 liters, extracting 428 horsepower and 457 pound-feet of torque. In an era when most racing touring cars struggled to crack 200 horsepower, this was absolutely obscene. The car weighed 1,635 kilograms, still a full 195 kilograms lighter than the production version thanks to some creative weight reduction, but enormous compared to everything else on the grid. Its footprint swallowed the competition. Its engine displacement more than doubled that of any other car in the race. Drivers Hans Heyer and Clemens Schickentanz wrestled this thing around the demanding Spa circuit for 24 hours, and when the checkered flag dropped, the Red Pig, or the Rote Sau, had finished second overall and won its class outright, defeating purpose-built race cars that weighed hundreds of pounds less. The result was so stunning that even Germany's ARD Tagesschau, the equivalent of the evening news, covered it. Automotor and Sport magazine called it a stroke of Swabian genius. And suddenly the entire automotive world knew the name AMG. This was not a factory racing effort. This was two guys from a small town in Baden-Württemberg who believed a luxury sedan could compete with dedicated sports cars, and then proved it at one of the most grueling endurance races in the entire world. Without the Red Pig's second-place finish at Spa in 1971, there is no AMG as we know it today. No AMG GT, no Black Series, no 63 or 65 badges on the back of every high-performance Mercedes. It all traces back to one absurd, beautiful, crimson-painted sedan that had no business being on a racetrack and yet refused to lose. Now let's talk about the car that was, in many ways, the most fascinating and morally complicated vehicle Mercedes ever built. The Mercedes-Benz 600 Pullman, produced from 1963 all the way to 1981, the 600 is widely regarded by automotive historians as the greatest luxury automobile ever produced. Not the greatest Mercedes, the greatest luxury car, period. Only 2,677 were ever built across the entire 18-year production run. Of those, 2,190 were standard saloons. Just 304 were four-door Pullmans, 124 were six-door Pullmans, 33 were four-door Landaulettes, and 26 were six-door Landaulettes, the rarest of them all. A Pullman in 1972 cost 110,000 German marks, roughly $234,000 in today's dollars. The 600 was powered by the same M106.3-liter V8 that would later find its way into the 450 SEL 6.9, producing 247 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, good for a top speed of 127 miles per hour, which is remarkable when you consider the car was essentially a rolling palace. The hydraulic system alone was a marvel. A 2,200 psi hydraulic pump powered the self-leveling air suspension, the power disc brakes, the doors, the seats, the trunk, the windows, the sunroof, the central locking, and the glass partition between the driver and passengers. Everything in the 600 was hydraulically operated, and it worked with a precision that most modern cars still can't match. Here's where the story gets complicated. The 600's owner list reads like a combined registry of Hollywood royalty and international war criminals. Coco Chanel owned one, so did Hugh Hefner, Elizabeth Taylor, John Lennon, George Harrison, and Elvis Presley. John Lennon's Pullman, chassis 1580, was ordered in late 1969 and delivered in February 1970, finished in white with black velvet upholstery, matching carpet, dual Becker Grand Prix radios, and a Philips Mignon EP record player built right into the cabin. When Lennon moved to the United States, the car passed to George Harrison, who eventually sold it to Mary Wilson of the Supremes. That one car's ownership history is a who's who of 20th century pop culture. But the same car that ferried the Beatles also served dictators, Nicolae Ceausescu, Fidel Castro, Saddam Hussein, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, Kim Il-sung. The Shah of Iran reportedly bought 17 of them, and Yugoslavia's President Tito also had a very unique Landaulet model. Ferdinand Marcos owned 4, and even James Bond's fictional nemesis, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, drove a 600. The Pullman didn't discriminate, offering the same 2,200 pounds per square inch hydraulic luxury to everyone, regardless of their human rights record. Well-preserved examples today can command prices up to $3.5 million, reflecting their extreme rarity and the full weight of their history. And finally, we arrive at a vehicle that started as a military contract and became an automotive icon that's still in production today, nearly unchanged. The Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, the W460, which went on sale in 1979. Its origin story begins, remarkably, with the same Shah of Iran we just mentioned. In the early 1970s, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi needed a rugged military vehicle for his army, and since he was a significant stakeholder in Mercedes-Benz, he persuaded the company's board to develop one. In 1975, German banks blocked his attempt to purchase a 25% stake in Daimler, but the vehicle project was already underway. Mercedes partnered with Steyr Daimler Puch of Austria for development. In 1974, they tested prototypes in the most punishing environments they could find, the Sahara Desert and the Arctic Circle. By 1975, Steyr crews were hand-building the first Geländewagens at a brand new facility in Graz, Austria. The original W460 was pure function. Flat panels, right angles, a high roof, wide doors, no superfluous styling, no aerodynamic compromises. Ladder frame construction, solid axles, and locking differentials. This was a tool, not a fashion statement, offered in 2 wheelbases and 3 body styles, a short wheelbase convertible, a short wheelbase wagon, and a long wheelbase 4-door wagon. Mercedes never officially exported the W460 to the United States, considered too utilitarian for the American market. And then the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran before the Shah's military order could be delivered, which left Mercedes with a bunch of rugged off-roaders and no army to sell them to. So they pivoted to civilian sales, and it turned out the world wanted the G-Wagon far more than any military contract could have ever provided, More than 50,000 were built in the first decade alone, and over 200,000 examples of the original series sold in total. The G-Wagon gained global fame in 1980 when Mercedes built a Pope-mobile based on a 230 G Cabriolet for Pope John Paul II's first visit to Germany. The image of the Pope standing in the back of a G-Wagon waving to crowds cemented the vehicle in the public imagination as something more than a military truck. It was a symbol, and that's the thread connecting all 5 of these cars. In the 1970s, while other manufacturers were retreating, Mercedes-Benz was building monuments. The 450 SEL 6.9 proved that luxury and brutality could coexist. The C111 proved the future was already here, even if they wouldn't let anyone buy it. The Red Pig proved that audacity beats convention. The 600 Pullman proved that ultimate craftsmanship is agnostic, serving saints and sinners with equal precision. And the G-Wagon proved that sometimes the best products come from plans that fell apart completely. 5 cars, 1 decade, and not a single one of them played it safe. That's what made Mercedes in the 70s not just a car company, but a force of pure engineering will. These weren't just cars, these were statements. And half a century later, every single one of them still hits harder than anything that came after.